Jonny, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on, Lewis. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, pleasure to have you as well. And yeah, taking your time out the sunshine, because I believe you've got nice weather where you are as well.
Yeah, well, in England, obviously, we don't get it too often. So when we do get it, we want to make the most of it, don't we?
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. Well, Jonny, I'm going to kick off with a question that I ask all our guests before we get into a little bit of your background. And that is about inspiration. So we always look for inspiration on this podcast. And I ask all our guests the same question. Who has inspired you maybe to get into running or even your line of work? Is there somebody who inspired you in the past or somebody who continues to inspire you to this day?
Well, I basically started when I was sort of 19, and it was just because my dad went running, actually. So I suppose it was probably my dad and I was a typical 19-year-old back 20 odd years ago now, and I was sort of going out drinking quite a bit and that. And then my mum said to me, "Oh, well, you should go out running with your dad and do." And then my dad says, "Well, I bet he won't keep up with me." So I thought, "Oh, well, I'm not having that." So I thought I went out for a run by myself, and I used to meet him I used to about 8 miles, and I used to meet him at a roundabout where I lived up north, and I used to run out about 2 miles and meet him and run back. And when I used to run out, I used to think, "Oh, this feels harder than when I ran back." And I just thought, I didn't have a watch on or any of this stuff we have now, Garmin's and all the rest of it. And I just thought, oh, it's probably because I'm running with someone, it's easier. Then I realised when I was running out, I was running faster than him. So I thought, and then I started running, and within 6 weeks, I did a 10K. And this is really bad, but I drank loads the day before. I was at Beverley Races. I went for a whole day out drinking when I was 19, and I did the race, and I ran 38 minutes, nearly killed me. But people were like, "You're actually very good. You know, you should take this seriously." So then I did a bit more running, joined a local club, but then I got quite a few injuries, so I stopped for about 5 or 6 years. Came back to it when I moved to Birmingham in 2012, and started doing just like 20 miles a week, just doing park runs and just being an unattached runner. And then I got Dave Payne at Tipton Harriers who asked me about joining, and he kept bothering me. And I was actually doing my nutritional therapy course at the time, and I thought, I'm quite busy with that. I'll just stop all right as I am, unattached. And eventually I joined. It was the best thing I did, really improved my running. And Dave really helped me a lot. I really enjoyed running with Tipton. We got some, and it was a big famous club as well. What I was quite proud to run for. I never thought I would run for a club like that. And then Matt Long now coaches me as well, and he's been really helpful, really supportive. And I'm sort of onto the Masters scene now. And I've got a couple of England vests, and just enjoying it. It's brilliant sport, isn't it? Especially in the sunshine.
Absolutely, yeah, fantastic. Well, lots of connections to new levels, which is why it's so good to have you on the podcast. And with the Matt connection, the Birmingham connection, Jethro obviously connecting us to line this podcast up. And I'll be honest, I've been really looking forward to it. Not talking about leaky guts, looking forward to it, but we get a lot of interest in this area. And before we go into kind of, I guess, the topic around gut health as a whole and, gut health for endurance runners, I wanted to give the audience a little bit more of an insight into your professional background. And you mentioned that you're a nutritional therapist and you've started on that journey. And what I really like about guests like yourself, Jonny, is that your profession lines up with your passion. And that really helps when we're having this conversation, because you've got real life experience of what runners are going through. You can relate to it as well. But if you'd just like to share a little bit of your professional background and give people an insight into what you do and how you help people.
Yeah, so I trained with the well-renowned Institute of Optimum Nutrition as a nutritional therapist back in 2015 when I was in Birmingham. I did a 3-year course with them part-time while I was working as a personal trainer, and I'm a personal trainer now. But my passion was really about nutrition, so that's why I wanted to go into. I mean, I literally will talk to people on Christmas Day if they want to talk to me about leaky gut. I literally am really, really passionate about, and this is what I've always wanted to do a job. I didn't want to work in something you're not passionate about, because I always say 5 days a week, the focus of your day is your work, whether you like it or not. So you need to do something you enjoy, because it's going to be quite a miserable time if you're going to spend. But so I've always said I want to do something I'm passionate about. So I did the 3-year course with the Institute of Optimum Nutrition. completed that, qualified as a nutritional therapist. I think it was January 2016, and I sort of specialize in gut health, in helping people, unexplained fatigue, what can be linked to gut health. It's all, poor sleep, what again can be linked to gut health. So we can all link it back, sports nutrition, and obviously weight management that links with the personal training. So that's what I do. I also, in lockdown, I did a PGCE as well. So I'm actually a qualified biology and PE teacher as well. So
Wow.
So that's what I did. So but my passion is definitely, nutrition really, and that is something, I do consultations with people. My business is Ultimate Personal Wellbeing. And that why it's called that is because it encompasses both the personal training and the nutritional therapy side of things. So yeah.
Brilliant. Man of many talents then, yeah. And like many, made the most of lockdown in a positive way to get either more qualified or more educated in some way. That's brilliant to hear. I guess that's where I want to start really, and addressing that the difference between a nutritionist and a nutritional therapist, because some people may just see those roles as being the same. But I believe from what I've discussed with you off the podcast, they are slightly different, and their approaches can be slightly different between a nutritionist approach to maybe sport and a nutritional therapist approach to sport. So do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a grey area as a nutritional therapist, because anybody could say they're a nutritionist. You could say you're a nutritionist. The postman could say he's a nutritionist. Because it's not really, anybody could say it. So, nutritional therapist, we had to do sort of a 3-year course, so it's very in depth. You learn, obviously, there's a lot to learn. A nutritionist, I mean, you get nutritionists, sports nutritionists who again have done master's degrees and different stuff. So I'm not saying that they're not qualified, but yeah. And as a nutritional therapist, we look more as a holistic approach to health. So we had lectures on sports nutrition when we were doing the nutritional therapy course, and they were saying actually nutritional therapists, a lot of them aren't so keen on helping sports people because a lot of them maybe don't have an interest in sport. But they were saying some nutritional therapists can be the best sort of sports nutritionist because they've got that nutritional therapy side as well as just the standard sports nutrition. So we look into some more gut health, hormonal health, those sort of things, stress management and things like that. What maybe a sports nutritionist doesn't look so much at. What it is, that's not their remit. So it's just, I think it's more of a holistic approach, what a nutritional therapist will use rather than. Yeah, so
it's a nice way of putting it. I think is a nutritionist is really delving deep into that nutrition, as you said. That's their role, and there's some very good nutritionists out there. Some who we work closely with, but those nutritional therapists are looking at, well, what is the impact of your general life and your well-being on your nutrition, and they do play such a big part, as we'll go into. And I see it as a coach. Sometimes I look at people's nutrition, I think, well, there's nothing wrong with nutrition, but you've still got gut issues. So there's clearly something else going on there. And it's really hard for me, who's not qualified, to put my finger on it. And that's where we've got to lean on the experts and work with the experts to try and get those answers. I guess let's kick off there. Like, what are the common gut issues that you see, or what are the common gut health issues that you see, particularly with endurance sports athletes?
Yeah, so there's your standard ones. So your diarrhea, constipation, more probably predominantly diarrhea. Lots of runners, we've all probably had at some point where we've had to run. Craig, we're glad to be back home. Or even have to dive into the bushes or anything like that. So the diarrhea is probably a common one. I know people like I think Brendan Foster suffered from it back when he was training for a period of time. But then you've also got, bloating, gas, sort of general stomach cramps, acid reflux, heartburn, nausea, all very, very common in athletes.
Yeah, and again, those words that you use, and you wouldn't believe how many times I see those coming up on our training logs. We have an online platform that we use, a coaching app, and people can rate their run, they can score it, and they can put the post-workout notes. And what you find out with runners is they're very happy to share, and you'll get a lot of detail from them. And you want that as a coach, you want them to be open and honest. And you wouldn't believe how many of those words that you've just used come up on a regular occasion. I had that bloatiness, but I guess the bit I want to start at here is they generally relate it back to their food. So they'll say, oh, it was something I ate at lunchtime. Oh, it might have been something I ate or tried to cram in just before my run. And I sometimes go back and say, well, it's not always that. It could be something else. And it could be things like your general gut health, or it could be something like stress in your day that's caused that. Is that something that you see regularly, Jonny, within your line of work, that it isn't just the kind of the diet, it can be other things that are causing those issues?
Yeah, 100%. Because, I mean, you can get, quite a few runners who have, I don't like to use the word healthy, unhealthy, because it's a bit of what's it really mean? But, they generally have what you'd call a healthy sort of diet. And so you're like, well, somebody comes to you and they're drinking, 8 cans of Coke a day and, and McDonald's every night. You might, right, well, this is why you're having gut issues. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to work it out. But if they are, generally having something quite healthy, generally throughout the day, there can be other issues. And this is one of them we're going to talk about, is sort of leaky gut, what is being shown to be very, very common in endurance athletes. It's basically characteristics of leaky gut can be actually shown after, basically in studies. There was a study done by, I think it's 2021, by the Frontier group, who found that just doing an hour of 70% or higher maximum heart rate exercise. So you're talking as an endurance runner, you're probably, steady running, not, really jogging, recovery running, but, anything sort of, steady running for an hour or more started the characteristics of leaky gut syndrome.
Interesting.
So that is, so basically pretty much most of the time when you run, you're getting the characteristics of leaky gut. So this is, I mean, the actual scientific name for it is gut permeability. Yeah, I'll be told off now by my course, actually, because they always said don't use the term leaky gut. That's the sort of colloquial name, because if you say that to a client who may be under a lot of stress, and you say, oh, you might have leaky gut, they suddenly think, oh my God, what was my gut literally falling to bits? Well, it's not like that. So it's actually gut permeability. So that can be very common in endurance runners, and it's been shown, in studies that it will happen basically.
And in layman's terms, Jonny, that gut permeability, which you do refer to as leaky gut, and I can see why people think leaky gut. God, what's happening to me? But what is going on there? What are some of those like signs and symptoms of leaky gut? Is that back to what you were describing earlier?
Yeah, so that this is the thing with leaky gut. You can get digestive problems, but also systemic problems as well. So it can be common as well it's common in endurance runners, but the average person can also get it who's not an athlete as well, through different, we'll probably go into that with, their potentially their diet, but also stress, etc. But the common symptoms are your diarrhea, constipation, stomach cramps, bloating, sort of irritable bowel syndrome. So you may go to the doctor, and the doctor may say, well, they may even send you to a gastroenterologist if it was an ongoing problem, and they may do tests, because what they test for is a specific disease. So they will look at, have you got ulcerative colitis? Have you got Crohn's disease? They may do an endoscopy check. Have you got stomach ulcer? Have you got gastritis, etc. If they don't find anything, they're likely to probably say, oh, it's irritable bowel syndrome. So that's, sort of the main sort of symptoms. But then we also get, because what can happen is when the gut becomes more porous. Now the gut, the small intestine, this is what we're talking about here. So the small intestine, we absorb our food through there, and the nutrients are then go into the bloodstream to go to where they need to be in the body. Now, so the small intestine is porous to a certain degree, but what happens when we get leaky gut or gut permeability is the tight junctions, what basically hold the gut together, become wider. And then this means then that instead of being only slightly permeable, it becomes more permeable. So then we get toxins, bacteria, what shouldn't be leaking out into the bloodstream, what can then cause the immune system to react and cause an immune reaction, what then can cause like fatigue, brain fog, depression, anxiety, all these sort of things as well. So it can cause multiple problems with people. One of the key one is fatigue. So yeah.
Interesting, isn't it? Because when again, naturally people pin fatigue onto the obvious. I've not been sleeping well, or I'm a little bit stressed with things. I might have been training too hard. I'm a little bit tired. But it's amazing how it can loop back to this one if which is to do with the gut, and it shows how important taking care of ourselves holistically is. If we go on to kind of that as the next subject point, so there may be some people listening here who think, I can relate to this. I know what Jonny's talking about here. I experience these type of things, and I'm currently doing nothing about this. I don't even know where to start. There is a term that a few people use about gut health and healthy gut, and you said you try to avoid that term, particularly that healthy diet. But I always think, are we looking after ourselves in general? Are we exercising? Are we sleeping well? Have we got a balanced diet? Is how I like to look at it. But what can people be doing in terms of that gut health and looking after their gut, taking care of it?
Yeah, so again, when we got this podcast, we could have a podcast probably literally a week long on this. So there's sorts of things you can do, but I think the biggest thing for me is feeding the gut microbiome. So we've probably all heard about the gut microbiome. It sounds a big fancy word, but basically it's the gut bacteria. You in your gut, you've got loads of bacteria, trillions and trillions, and there's good and bad. There's yeast in there as well, good and bad. And basically what we want is a diversity of that bacteria in the gut. So we want lots of it, different types and all. And basically the good bacteria sort of outweighing the more pathogenic bacteria. And how we do that, so it used to be the research was made, put a probiotic in to give people probiotics. But the research is now suggesting more that we need to actually put in prebiotics in. So prebiotics are actually food for the good bacteria. So how I describe it is like fertilizer for your bacteria. So you basically like these prebiotics, they fertilize the gut bacteria. So it's things like adding things to diet like garlic, onions, leeks, avocados, oats. They're very good because they feed the good bacteria in your gut. So they're basically fermented. So they're really good, these foodstuffs. Now, I would say be careful when you do, because if you suddenly start putting loads of onions and garlic, you're going to be, if you're asleep on a night, you're going to be blowing the sheets off because, and don't do it just the night before race. Don't do that because you might have a few people standing clear of you on the start line, I suppose, but you definitely won't want many people running behind you. But yeah, so just because what generally happens when you add prebiotics, the bacteria get a bit excited all at once. So just go in very slowly, but add some garlic, onions to your diet if you're not already consuming those. But the other thing is you can also take a prebiotic supplement, what can be quite useful as well. Now, there's lots of them on the market. Some of them, so there's a fructoolisaccharides, what's short form called FOS. They're basically fermented quite quickly, so they can cause quite a lot of gas in people. Some people are fine with it, some people aren't. So it's a bit of a, so I often go for more something like PHGG, what's partially hydrolyzed guar gum, what actually is fermented quite slowly, so generally doesn't cause any gas and bloating in people. It's very, very unusual it does. And it's also certified low FODMAP. What basically, this is another thing, but if you've got IBS, often it said, "Oh, go low FODMAP." I wouldn't necessarily always go with that long term, but that's probably another thing we could talk about. But yeah, so I would look at something like the Gut Booster from Myota. I use that myself. I can actually show you. I mean, I've got a packet of it here, so I can probably show you that. It's a Gut Booster. I use it. It says use a scoop. I wouldn't use a scoop. Basically, I'd probably use half a scoop and put it in your porridge, or you can just add it to a hot drink. It dissolves. It doesn't taste of anything. And that's a really good way to get your prebiotic fiber in. If you did want to buy that as well, you just to jump on, I think it's myotahealth.com. And if you use my code Ultimate20 after my, Ultimate20, I think you get a 20% discount. So, that's just because I know there is so many different prebiotics on the market, and I just want to, and that one is a very good one. Like I say, some people are okay with FOS. I think Myota do one with FOS in, fructooligosaccharides, but some people aren't. And my experience is probably about a 50-50 split. Definitely, if you're already having gut issues, stay away from the FOS. I would. If you're not having gut issues, but you still want to increase your prebiotics, well, I would definitely think it's beneficial for anybody, whether you're having gut issues or not. You could take the FOS, but if you're having any gut issues whatsoever, I would stay clear of the FOS, because that can sort of cause a bit of gas and bloating in some people. And again, go in a bit slower. So when I say half a scoop, maybe the first couple of days, just have a quarter of a scoop, then build it up to half a scoop, just so your body gets used to it.
Interesting, yeah, because that was going to be my next question. Before I do go into that next question, I'll put that in the show notes, Jonny. So I'll grab that off you, that code, and then I can stick it in the show notes. So if people do want to trial that, and as you said, you asked the question before the podcast, you're happy for me to put that on. And I said, absolutely. If you feel like it can help somebody, because sometimes people get a bit of brain fog with having to search through all the supplements that are online these days, and they're recommended by anybody. The next influencer around the corner is recommending the new product, the new craze. So I think it's really good to have recommended product from trusted sources that are there. So we're more than happy to put that in there. But that was going to be one of my questions that you kind of touched on there. So for people who aren't having gut issues, this is quite a good addition to potentially their diet to keep their gut healthy. But you're saying people with gut issues maybe stay away. Is that because it's a little bit more complicated?
No, so I'll say if you're having any gut issues, have the prebiotic, but go for the the Gut Booster. Don't go for one with the FOS in, because FOS, in my experience, I mean, that's not just anecdotal. It's generally considered that FOS can cause problems in quite a few people. But if you're not having gut issues, you maybe could have the FOS, but I would go with a pH, because the pHGG, there's a lot of research that's shown that it has increased the lactobacillus bacteria, bifidobacterium, what are really important healthy bacteria in our gut. So I would probably go with the one I suggested, just to be on the safe side, especially as well, even if you've not got any gut issues. As we know with running, if you don't have any gut issues in general life, but then if you run, sometimes they can crop up.
Yeah.
Running longer, doing marathons, ultras, all this type of thing. So I would always err on the side of caution. And if you do, but when you do start it, don't start it just before a race, obviously, because if you do have any side effects, we don't want any of that, obviously, during a race.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's a really good message to share in general. We share that about trying new shoes with running, trying new kits out, trying anything new. The key to that is trying it first, and don't just start doing it just before a key race. You might have some other races in the calendar where you can do a bit of training into it, and you can trial it in those less important races before those big goal races you have in the year, and that'll give you a really good understanding of whether it's working for you. You mentioned there, Jonny, about the longer distances. We are seeing people go longer now. We've kind of had a craze around the Ironman, and that seems to have boomed, and that's still very popular. We've had the marathon craze, and there's lots of people still doing half marathons, but now there very much is an ultra craze. People, whether that's on the road, but particularly on the trails, we're seeing that industry booming at the minute. And from our perspective as coaches, what we tend to see is the longer the event, the more gut issues we see. And I can come at that from a coaching angle and say, well, this is my perception. This is why I feel that is the case. But I'd love to get your take on that. Firstly, is that what you see? The longer they go, the more gut issues they experience. And any particular reasons why you think that might be the case?
Yeah, 110%. And one thing I will say at the start of this, anybody who does an ultra marathon, I tip my hat to you, because I always put on my Facebook pretty much every year when I watch the London Marathon, I put it's really inspiring. And at least for about an hour, I think about doing the marathon. And then I think, no. And I always put, actually, I'd rather sit on a cactus eating glass than do a marathon.
So you're a shorter distance.
Yeah. So fair play to. So I love working with you, but it's not. Maybe one day. I always think maybe if I start slowing down, I'll maybe do a marathon and give me a bit of motivation. I should do one, shouldn't I? But at the moment, yeah. So going back to your point about definitely the longer you go. So it's been shown that what exacerbates these problems are heat. So if we're in a really hot environment, and then the longer we go, the intensity, the length, and the heat. The longer we go, the more problems. What the mechanism for that is, so the mechanism for these sort of leaky gut characteristics isn't 100, there's a lot of research is ongoing, but what it's basically put down to is a lack of blood flow to the gut. So when we are running, obviously our gut doesn't need much blood flow to it because it needs to go all to the working muscles. So our blood flow to the gut's restricted. So that leads to basically when we have blood flowing to the gut. So let's start with the stomach. For the stomach, what we produce in the stomach, we have stomach acid and we have a mucus lining around the stomach, and the stomach's continuously producing mucus. If we didn't have that mucus lining, we'd all have ulcers and we'd be all in agony all the time. So what happens when that blood's flowing? That blood flowing to the stomach increases that mucus production. So when the blood flow is less, that means that less mucus is going to be produced. Stomach acid is still there. What does that cause? Inflammation. So that is one of the mechanisms of action. So that's in the stomach. Then in the small intestine, basically the similar things happening, because the small intestine also produces mucus to protect the lining of the small intestine. Again, when the blood flow is restricted, we're going to get basically less mucus being produced. So there's less protective factors around the small intestine. That equals more inflammation and more leaky gut characteristics. So if you think about it, the longer we go, that's longer time where we're going to have less blood flow into the gut. So we're just going to have this inflammation longer and longer. So it's basically intensity. So that is, if you run hard for 15 minutes, or if you're a 5K runner and you run for 16, 17 minutes, whatever, and you're still going to get characteristics of leaky gut. But running a half marathon at high, or a marathon or longer, you're going to get worse problems because of this lack of blood flow. There's also another mechanism of action is that there's increasing. It's getting a bit scientific now, so I don't want to go too much into all the scientific mumbo jumbo, but it's increasing reactive oxygen species. I don't know, it sounds like some sort of thing off a computer game, doesn't it? But basically what that is, I'll try and do it a bit in layman's terms, but I don't know if people remember back to the old chemistry days when we used to have electrons on, and if they didn't have the full outer shell of electrons, they used to make them more reactive, and if you put, I should remember, because if you put certain chemicals in a water bath, it'd explode. Potassium, wasn't it? And it exploded because it was more reactive, because it had less electrons. That's what these reactive oxygen species, they're basically unstable molecules because they're low on electrons. So they try and react with every other molecules in the cells. And then what that happens with that, all these reactions cause inflammation. So that's the two mechanisms. It's an increase in reactive oxygen species, lack of blood flow. But then a caveat is the lack of blood flow is also linked to causing an increase in these reactive of oxygen species, if that makes sense. So I hope I haven't tried to, because I don't want to sound like some sort of scientific nerd who's going to, trying to show off all these fancy words. But yeah, that's basically what's probably happening.
So we're seeing, like you say, that intensity over time playing a factor, which is huge, as you say, as you start to run longer. And pretty much anybody who's running a marathon is at moderate intensity, if not slightly higher. So everybody is going to come across those issues. And then the other thing you're throwing in the mix now, which is becoming more and more common and more discussed, particularly in the endurance world, is fueling. Because it's very topical about, how many carbohydrates can you get in an hour, and people are trying and testing limits of this. But that adds another dimension to it, doesn't it? Because then the body is having to tolerate whatever you put in there as well. And that can cause people issues on top of what we already know the science shows.
Yeah, and it's a bit like, so I had a friend of mine, he's a good marathon runner. He's ran, he has run sub 2:30, and then the course was called short. So I'll always remember back.
Oh.
So he ran 2:32 is his best time. But he Manchester back in 2015, I think. But anyway, he did another marathon where he made a bit of a mess of it because he had a I think he took a Gatorade on or something. I don't know why he did this. He said he couldn't be. He just got past it or something, and he took it, and it gave him stomach problems and that. And I said, if he had took that on an average, I don't know, Thursday afternoon, and he just drank it in the office. I'm not saying that's a good nutrition tip, by the way, but anyway, if he did that, he probably wouldn't have had any problems. But we've got to know that we've got these. He's probably already got these characteristics of leaky gut. This was around at the 20-mile point or whatever.
Yeah.
And so he's got these, so his gut is really, really sensitive. So then he takes something on what doesn't slightly agree with him, it's going to cause all those of problems. And safe to say, he ended up using the toilet, one of the portaloos and all sorts. And he made a bit of a mess of it. And yeah, so basically our gut is going to be more sensitive. So we've got to be so careful what we put into it during and before, especially things like a marathon, but even any, a 10K, a 5K, because, the body is going under stress and the gut is under stress, and it won't react how it might react if you just had it, and you just sat watching, watching telly on a Sunday afternoon or whatever. It can react very differently. So we need to practice that probably before. And this is even, like I say, putting these healthy things like the prebiotics, you need to do that, don't do it the morning before a marathon, something like that, because, you could have problems. So, yeah.
Well, a common term we use in our coaching, particularly with our longer distance runners, is training the gut. And there's a lot of science out there to back this around. Again, back to your point, really, Jonny, about not just throwing things in and trying them and picking up a gel on the course because you can see it and it looks good and it's probably quite expensive to buy online. So you think, well, I'll pocket a few of them and maybe try them on the race day. There's a lot of literature out there that says training the gut, one, is really useful, and two, can help prevent these gut problems that we see. And I get that can be quite tricky at times for athletes because there is a cost associated to that. If you are going to take gels and things on marathon day or ultra day, or whether you're doing a long triathlon, then you're going to have to pay to trial those things in training too. But I always have that conversation with an athlete, an honest conversation, and say, well, it is a cost to it, but do you want to risk mucking it up on race day because you're not willing to invest in yourself now? It's cost you a lot of money to go and do that event. It's surely got to be worth it. I don't know if you have a kind of a take on general gut training and training the gut whilst you're in your build-up phase.
Yeah, I mean, there's is it Jeckendrup, the sports scientist?
Right.
Yeah. I think I referenced it, most of his stuff in my degree when I did my sport health, exercise, nutrition, and he does a lot of stuff on training the gut. And yeah, I think to be honest, I'd say it's common sense, really. You need to practice your pre-race nutrition. And I think there's been, the studies show that actually, say, if you have a regular high carbohydrate diet, more glucose transporters will be produced in the gut. So actually it means while you're actually running, say, a marathon, you will absorb carbohydrate better to fuel you. So things like that. So having a high carbohydrate diet, in your training, building up to amount, and then even certain like supplements. If you're going to take supplements, I mean, there is a certain supplement called L-citrulline. What's pretty inexpensive, actually. You can buy a pouch for about £8 sometimes, but yeah, it's pretty, and that actually helps increase blood flow. Because it's basically a precursor to something called L-arginine, what then increases nitric oxide. What nitric oxide then it basically increases blood flow around the body. I don't know if you know all about the beetroot juice. That was I mean, I had that. My sister did the London Marathon last year, and she said about a week before, "Do I need beetroot juice?" And I thought, no, I would have won't swear in a podcast, but yeah, I was like, no, you don't, you don't, because you don't want to put that in a week before and start having beetroot juice and that type of thing. But that's the principle. Basically, just supposed to increase nitric oxide, what increases blood flow. So things like L-citrulline can actually help increase blood flow, what can possibly reduce those symptoms of leaky gut, etc. So I had a client a while ago, and she's doing an ultra. And I said to her, she was having gut issues on the longer runs in training. So I got her taking L-citrulline, and she said it was helping her. And then she said she still was having trouble when she was doing really long runs, because she was running for like 4-5 hours and stuff. When I think about it, she told me, I couldn't think of anything worse. But anyway, again, I tip my hat to these people. But yeah, so she was. So I told her to, because she's obviously taking drinks with her where she was going, a little backpack, etc. I said, take another dose of L-citrulline and take that after about 2.5 hours, and it really did help her. So there is, but again, you would do that because L-citrulline, if you take too much of it, it can cause a bit loose stools. The evidence is that up to 9 grams is okay. Over 9 grams, there's not really any studies on that. I mean, this is anecdotal, from a personal perspective, I've took it. If I take about 5 grams, I notice when I get back from a run, I do feel a bit loose, so to speak. But yeah, so you probably test out maybe 2 grams to start with and just build that up. But yeah, I would then, if you're going to do that, again, do it before to train the gut. But yeah, the other thing is as well, gut training as well, like again, gels, you want to test which ones react well with your gut, which ones maybe don't suit you. The other thing is sensations of fullness. I mean, some runners don't eat enough. They think they eat a lot, but they actually don't, and so they maybe need to increase their calories. There was actually another running podcaster I listened to probably a couple of years ago now, and he was a guy running 100 miles a week, and he was saying he found out some days he was only eating 1,800 calories a day. Mm-hmm. And he was, and he said, I've started eating more, but he said, I feel so full, and that. So that's again, sensations of fullness. To increase your calorie intake, your carbohydrate intake, you need to practice that and do that over weeks so your body gets used to it. So yeah, I think so that's the main thing I'll do really, but just make sure you do practice your nutrition before.
There's a few commonalities here which I want to touch on, because I think they're really important. And I was listening to a podcast recently that was talking about training the gut, specifically to ultra, actually, and ultra trail. And the point that you just made, Jonny, which is a really good point, a lot of people just try and cram all of these carbohydrates in, and actually they don't even have the gut size to do that, because they've not trained the gut, and the gut does slightly expand. Like what they were saying was these people aren't consuming enough in their general diet, and their gut is limited, and then they're trying to shove all this stuff in on the race, and it's no surprise that it's being rejected. But what was a really good point on that podcast, and it just relates so nicely to the coaching world and everything that you've been saying so far, is no matter what you're putting in, whether it's a supplement, whether you're trialing gels, whether you're trying to train anything, there's got to be a progression with this training. Like with your running training, you don't start off your long run at 26 miles because you're going to do a marathon. And you probably don't actually get it to 26 miles. You probably start somewhere around the 10-mile mark and you build it up 10, 12, and you might drop down a little bit and then you might progress it. And in the coaching world, we call this progressive overload or over time. And it's exactly what you're describing with these supplements. Don't start with a full scoop, maybe start with a quarter and then build that up, build that tolerance up. And it's exactly the same when you're training with these gels. Is not only have you got to find what works for you and what sits well. If somebody tells you that you should be taking 60 grams an hour for carbs and you've not been doing that, don't start there. It's not going to end well.
Yeah,
That's what we're saying.
Yeah.
And it's, I think some people just assume that they can go straight to it and they can do it. And then they have an upset stomach and then they say, well, those gels don't work for me. And I'm thinking, well, it maybe isn't the gel. It's maybe how much you're trying to consume. And that's kind of what you're saying there, isn't it? It's like sometimes it's the amount you're trying to put in as well that can be the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard these stories of people before, the carbo loading stuff before a marathon, and then they just feel really bloated and get gut problems because the body's just not used to it. And like you say, the stomach actually expands in size so if you eat really small amounts all the time, basically, your stomach will actually shrink, and then it actually expands. The body's very, very capable. It's very clever. It adapts, but it needs to be given time to do that. And like you say with the running, you wouldn't, like you say, you wouldn't do a 26-mile run. If you're going to start marathon training and you're doing 3 runs a week, you wouldn't say, go out and do 26 miles. So yeah, it's this case as well with the gut. If you're increasing your fiber content, what's really important, again, because the fiber will increase your gut diversity of gut bacteria. But again, you should do it gradually, because if you eat loads and loads of fiber, again, if you put the prebiotic powder and you think, oh well, if 1 scoop's good, put 3 scoops in, you'll just feel really bloated, full, because fiber slows your digestion. So you just need to do it gradually, and make gradual changes rather than definitely.
It's all really interesting stuff, and I know it'll be super helpful for people as they go towards their next race or whatever kind of challenge they have, whether it is a shorter distance or a longer distance. But when we put this podcast out, Jonny, it's going to come just after the kind of the key marathon. We've got Manchester and London on the same day this year. You've got Boston that's in America in the same week. I think Paris is this weekend. There's loads of marathons coming up in April in particular. And we're going to put this out just after that. And I know some people are going to listen to this and say, this was me. I had issues in my marathon recently. And I guess what I want to give them is a little bit of, well, what can they do now about that? What should they do if they've got this as a common problem? They're getting stomach issues, gut issues on the day of their big race, and they're getting a little bit fed up with that. What would be the sensible steps for them to take that will help them in the future?
So I think, looking at the gut health, also not thinking, right, a few days before I can do loads to my gut to improve it. You need to look at this as a long-term thing to improve your gut health. So, as I mentioned before, prebiotics, really important to increase the diversity of bacteria in the gut, because basically, if we've got more diversity in the gut, how would I put where this blood flow issue, we can't really do much about that. The blood flow is going to be restricted, apart from taking something like citrulline, what will help reduce it. But we're running, we're going to have restricted blood flow. So what we need to do is get the gut in as best shape, like we have our bodies in their best shape to deal with these problems. So we want the gut in the best shape. We always talk about, what shape you're in. Oh, are you in good shape? Are you running well? We want the gut in the best shape possible to deal with these issues. So how do we get that in the best shape possible? Prebiotics. Put the prebiotics in, the fertilizer for these gut bacteria. With more diversity in the gut of bacteria, that reduces inflammation in the gut. So if we've already got an inflammatory response before we even start running, then we start running, what's going to happen? We're just going to be worse and worse. So like I was saying at the start, leaky gut can happen. It can happen quite often in just people who don't run, who aren't endurance athletes, because they may have bad diet, they don't have enough prebiotics in the diet, high stress, things like that. So before we run, we want to have that gut in that best shape. So yeah, probiotics can be beneficial. Now, the evidence is more, the prebiotics now are more beneficial because we're sort of, acting as fertilizer for the gut bacteria. The only issue with probiotics is I'm a bit adverse to using loads of them because it depends which strains you actually need. We all are very different. Now, I do as a practitioner, I actually do stool testing. Well, not myself personally. Somebody once asked me that stool test or I'm a house. But basically, I use a company called Genova Diagnostics, who are based, I think Worcester somewhere like that. But they send their stuff off to America because that's where they're originally based, and they do tests for the gut microbiome, so levels of gut bacteria, inflammatory markers in the gut. And I do sometimes that's useful because then I might find, I had a marathon runner a while ago and he was low in certain bacteria, so then I thought, right, I'm going to get this probiotic, what actually puts in those bacteria. Whereas some people, if you put other probiotics in, they might not be low in them. They can actually, some people can cause nausea, make things potentially worse or not better. So I would always go on the side of prebiotics. Though probiotics can be beneficial, but I would probably have a gut analysis test first if you want to get the best results with probiotics. I'm not saying, you can, go and buy a probiotic and a good quality one from a company like Bicare or whatever, and it may benefit you, but you are a bit stabbing in the dark still with probiotics, but they can be beneficial. The other thing what's beneficial, L-glutamine, really good supplement. So L-glutamine is our preferred fuel source for the gut lining, so the stomach lining and the intestinal lining. So it's fantastic for leaky gut. Now, L-glutamine is actually we produce it in our body. So it's an amino acid, what basically means it's non-essential. So we do produce it. However, it is considered, this is the key thing for runners, conditionally essential. So that means that in certain instances, we do need to take, so that if you look in literature, it'll say when people are going through operations or things like that, or extensive stress. And what's more stressful with the gut than running a marathon or an ultra or whatever? So this is when L-glutamine can be really beneficial. So taking L-glutamine helps basically heal the gut lining because it's the preferred fuel source for the gut. Then there's something else called zinc carnosine, what is fantastic. Zinc carnosine has been shown to decrease in studies gut permeability. It's basically zinc attached to something called L-carnosine, what's another amino acid. And without going into all the scientific mumbo jumbo, it just helps it attach to the actual area's inflammation. And when I was saying about this supplement earlier, there is another supplement, what I would recommend, what actually combines both L-glutamine and zinc carnosine. It's called Rescue. I've got it here actually. It's from Ferronordics. If you go on their website, and you can order that. I've got some because I use it again myself. Very good. And again, you can put a discount. My discount code for that, I think, is just Jonathan Carter. But if you put that in, you'll get, I think, 10% off. So not quite as good as the other one with 20% off, but you get sort of 10% discount on that. So that's a good supplement. The other thing to consider as well is going back to diet as well, because I like to touch on supplements because I think they're very beneficial, especially for runners when we're asking quite a lot of the body. But diet's so why a lot of people have issues in runners with leaky gut as well is because a lot of runners have gut dysbiosis. Gut dysbiosis is just basically an overgrowth of more pathogenic bacteria in the gut than good bacteria in layman's terms. There's a bit more to it than that, but that's in layman's terms. And what feeds sort of the more bad bacteria, the less helpful bacteria, is sort of simple carbohydrates, things like white bread, sugary drinks. Now, in sports nutrition, obviously after training, we, sugary drinks is great because we want to get high glycemic index carbohydrates into the body so it replaces the used glycogen and all that. But in some people with compromised gut problems, that can sometimes not the best idea, because we can get this dysbiotic problem, where we're getting overgrowth of pathogenic bacteria. So this is where sometimes things like bananas might be better, because they're sort of absorbed still quite quickly, but they don't tend to feed. They're actually more as a prebiotic to bananas, so that's quite a good option. But also, again, the prebiotics, you can sort of counteract that by taking prebiotics. In an ideal world, we wouldn't have maybe sugary carbohydrates, but as runners, sometimes we do need those.
Yeah.
So it's trying to sort of balance these things. But if you're having some gut issues, if you weren't a runner, I would say, maybe stop the simple sugars. But simple sugars are quite useful.
Yeah.
So this is where the supplements can try and tip the balance positively, and having maybe the prebiotic powder, the L-glutamine, the L-synganosine, the rescue together, what can really, really help matters, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And that's a really good point, actually, because, some people be sat here think, well, I rely on those sugars. I need those sugars for my performance. So it's a nice link there to say, well, actually, if you still want to use those things, then maybe the supplements are going to be helpful. And there'll be some people who listen to this podcast and maybe they've never experienced gut issues. And then again, that's absolutely fine. We're not saying this is for everyone. What Jonny said right at the start is this is very individual. But if you are sat here and you're getting common gut issues, and I really like the way you put it, Jonny, about, get your gut in the best shape, because that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to be in the best shape we can be on that start line. And the gut is part of us. It's very simple. It's part of our makeup. So we want that in the best shape. I actually thought about it from another point of view when you were talking, like we talk about long-term athlete development, like long-term gut development too. It's not just going to happen overnight. It's got to be a long-term, long-term solution. You've got to apply yourself long-term to this type of thing. So I think there's some really good insights there for people to take. Brilliant. Well, that's a nice way to round things up. But I always ask if there's anything that we've not covered, Jonny, that you feel like it's really important to get a message across.
Yeah, I just thought one thing. I mean, like I say, we could be here till 10 o'clock tomorrow morning if we with it. There's lots of things we haven't covered, but I think one of the key things is non-sterile anti-inflammatory drugs, because I know a lot of runners pop them like wine gums or whatever. They basically, I've got a bit of a sore calf. Take an ibuprofen, take another ibuprofen. Now, they've been shown, the studies are extensive, that they will cause leaky gut. So I'm not saying don't take them, because sometimes you may have to take them again, but just be aware of them, because basically, if you do have to take them long term, if you go to a GP and they give you them because, I don't know, arthritis or whatever, they will give you a proton pump inhibitor drug with them. What basically reduces your stomach acid to stop you getting stomach ulcers. Because basically what non-sterile anti-inflammatory drugs, so things like ibuprofen, what they do is they reduce something called prostaglandins in the body. And those prostaglandins, if you reduce them, they will dampen sort of acute inflammation and pain. But they're also different types of these prostaglandins. They also decrease stomach acid and protect the gut lining as well. So decreasing those will definitely, cause leaky gut. It's been sort of really quite extensive. And they've also found, new research now is also saying that they negatively impact the gut microbiome. But I think that's, in my personal opinion, I think that's because they cause this inflammation in the gut lining, what causes leaky gut. So yeah, just be very mindful of, I'm not saying, obviously, if your doctor says you need to take them, that's not what, I'm not saying don't take them, but don't be just, I've got a bit of a sore calf today, I'll take, these for a few days, then a couple of days later, oh, I've got a bit of a sore, your hamstring slightly sore, you know, I'll take, because they do have quite bad side effects. And like I say, GPs will you know, will say the same thing, hence why they give out a proton pump inhibitor, because they know that if you take long-term ibuprofen, you are likely to get, you know, a stomach ulcer or gastritis.
And I'm going to throw my coaching opinion in here as well and say, if you're taking things like that to get you through training, you probably shouldn't be training. And I know, athletes, you know, we want to mask that pain, but a rest day doesn't hurt anybody. And in fact, it can be really beneficial. And if you've got those niggles and you're popping pills to get through training, it's probably not the best idea long term, as Jonny's saying as well. So from both of us as a coach and a nutritional therapist, the message is, if you can avoid them, then do. But obviously there are cases where people have to, and we get that. Yeah. We get that. Yeah. Brilliant. Well, to finish off, Jonny, where can people find out more about you and what you do? So where could they follow along with the things that you do? Are you on social media, and we can pop that on the show notes as well?
Yeah, so I'm on it Instagram. So it's just at Ultimate Personal Wellbeing. I'm on Facebook. I think you put facebook.com out. This was because it's quite an old Facebook page. I've kept it the same. So it's just Facebook, Jonathan Carter PT, but I can send you the link anyway. Okay. And then my website is www.ultimatepersonalwellbeing.co.uk, and on there there's actually there's a blog section on there, and there is a couple of blogs on Leaky Gut in endurance runners as well. So if you want to read through those, and there's, you know, different blogs on different sort of things. But and I also provide, you know, nutritional therapy consultations via sort of Microsoft Teams, so I can work with people anywhere in the world. Not so long ago, I was working with some people in Canada. So the upside of the internet now is that we can connect with everybody. There's plenty of downsides, what I won't go into now.
And that's the whole podcast.
Yeah, but there's plenty of upsides to it as well. It makes us all very easy to connect. So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we'll put those in the show notes, and then people can reach out to you. But a big thank you for coming on again, Jonny. I've really enjoyed that chat. I never thought I'd say that. We're having an enjoyable chat about leaky gut, but hey ho, you find out a lot about it, and I know that'll have been very insightful for all of our listeners as well. So thanks again for joining us.
No problem at all, Lewis. It's been an absolute pleasure, and like I say, I hope your listeners have enjoyed it and they find it beneficial.
I'm sure they will. And just a message for them before we go, as always. Hope you have enjoyed it. And we'll see you all very soon. And if you have got races coming up, and big races, then best of luck. Cheers, everybody.